Hello and welcome to Melomaniax, the podcast where we take unbiased deep dives into the biggest musicians and bands of all time. I'm Ashton.
And I'm Dallas, and I'm really liking that sultry NPR tone today.
Oh, yeah.
That sounded nice. Today we're going to be continuing, actually, part 2 of a 2-part series. This is the final part of our discussion about the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC. But before we dive in, please don't forget to go ahead and subscribe and like on YouTube if that's where you're listening to this. Give us a follow on Instagram and TikTok. Most importantly, please hit us with those 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify Podcasts or wherever you're listening to this. We appreciate those reviews on any platforms. They really help us grow this show. Also, we officially have a Patreon. It's open now and available for you to join for $5 a month. That's going to give you access to our private Discord server, as well as a shout out on an episode, the ability to vote on future episode topics. So let's dive in.
Sweet. So last time we talked about the documentaries, specifically the one about Lou Pearlman. And then we also talked a little bit about the Backstreet Boys one, which we'll dive into again when we get there on the timeline. But we said in this part 2, we're going to do more of the traditional episode as far as timeline, album release dates and numbers and all the fun stuff. So let's dive back to the beginning like we always do. And with the Backstreet Boys first, who were formed in 1993, the year I was born. Let's go. They're as old as I am. And they were formed in Orlando, Florida. Lou Pearlman actually had seen the success of vocal groups like Boyz II Men, New Kids on the Block. And the first member that Lou added to the group was A.J. McLean, who was born and raised in Florida. And Lou was holding hundreds of auditions through 92 and 93. Howie Doro knew AJ through a mutual vocal coach, and that's how Howie landed his audition. And then they also discovered Nick Carter through the same outlet, and that became a early trio before the other two members were added. So then they added Kevin Richardson, who was from Lexington, Kentucky, and he actually moved down to Orlando in 1990 to work at Disney World. And after Kevin's audition went well and he became part of the group, he actually called up his cousin, Brian Littrell, and told him about the opportunity. And so Brian flew down to Florida, became that 5th and final member. So now...
That's right. They performed their first show.
That's right.
Yeah, the boys are back in town. They performed their first show at SeaWorld, actually, which is kind of funny, on May 8th, 1993. And they continue to play different venues around town, like restaurants, malls, the occasional charity event. And after Lou brought in Johnny Wright, a legendary tour manager for some other bands in the past, like Boyz II Men, I think was one of them. Mm-hmm. They started touring schools around the country to develop their fan base while they attempted to get a record deal. So they almost got signed by Mercury Records, but it fell through because John Mellencamp, longtime artist on the label, threatened to leave if the company got into the boy band business. That's a little annoying. Right. They landed on getting signed by Jive Records in 1994. At the end of 1994, the group flew to Sweden to work with Max Martin and Dennis Pop. And during this time, the band did almost 2 years of touring in Europe, primarily in Germany.
Yeah, and they talk about that in the documentary. I think you mentioned it last time that they all had like German girlfriends because they were in Germany so often, knowing a little bit of German lingo. Forgot to mention also just the amount of in '93, just the amount of work that they put in at the blimp hangar beforehand. They said it was like 10 and 12-hour days they were in there, just in the like
in Florida heat. It's that's crazy. And they're dancing, they're singing, they're working, putting their show together. So that's a lot of practice.
Oh yeah, lots of work was put into this group. So anyways, while the Backstreet Boys were away in Europe, Lou decided to put together another group called NSYNC. And I think we talked about it last time. It was like he wanted to create the Backstreet Boys competition before someone else did, beat him to the punch. So then he would have both of the headlining acts. And a lot of people that were working for Lou felt pretty dirty about this, like that he was putting another boy band together, like while Backstreet Boys were out of the country, kind of behind their backs. And I think Kevin mentioned that Lou had mentioned to him that he was putting another band together in like 95. And Kevin just didn't really think much of it, but was kind of like, oh, okay. I mean, I guess. And so this new group started with Chris Kirkpatrick, who was working at Universal Studios. I think that's so funny. That is like, instead of Disney, the other one's working at Universal.
Yeah.
For the other, it's like literally
funny.
like the exact opposite like band or group. I don't know what to call them. I call them a band usually just because I think they're a group.
One of my favorite lines in the documentary we watched was when Chris Kirkpatrick says, when Eminem released that song, that's when he found out that Kirkpatrick rhymes with "get your ass kicked." He's like, "Well, that's the first time I've heard that."
That's funny. Oh, that's good. So Lou took interest in Chris when he heard him performing in a doo-wop group, actually. And Chris was basically tasked with finding the other members. And he first discovered Justin Timberlake, who had been on the Mickey Mouse Club, for anybody who remembers that. And then through the Mickey Mouse Club connection, Justin reached out to Joshua Scott, who was also on the Mickey Mouse Club. And Joshua Scott Chases? How did we pronounce this last time? Chazes?
Chazes? I don't know. He goes by JC.
JC,
so that's what we'll call him.
We're going to call him JC. But that was... So he was brought on. And so then that trio went down to Orlando in search of a baritone. But they found Chris's ex-coworker from Universal Studios instead, Joey Fatone. And the group finally found a bass singer in Jason Galisso, who was the final member added. And the group came up with their name after Justin's mom commented on how NSYNC the group was. And additionally, I didn't know this, but it's also a play on all their names. So the capital N from the last letter of Justin, and then the S from Chris, the Y from Joey, the N from Jason, and the C from JC makes NSYNC. So I never knew that. Love getting new information.
Didn't know that either. I wonder if that was actually like something they decided on, or if they were just like, "Oh my God, can you believe this?" Like,
yeah, that's what I was like.
It was already done, you know.
I was thinking about that. I was like, man, it's kind of crazy that it's like the last letters of their names, and it just so happens to be a play on the word NSYNC. I don't know. I feel like one of them's true, and the other just happened to be discovered. Whichever way it worked.
Yeah. True. Very true. Yeah, so after a few weeks of rehearsals, the group set up a showcase, and Jason Galisso dropped out last minute. That sucks. He claimed that being a teen idol really wasn't his goal, and the group had to scramble to find another bass. So Justin called his vocal coach, asked if he knew anybody, and was recommended to reach out to Lance Bass. Helps that the last name is the same as what they needed.
Right.
A 16-year-old kid, 16, from Mississippi. So Lance flew out to Orlando to audition, became the new 5th member, and funny enough, Lou sent the group to Sweden to work with Max Martin while the Backstreet Boys' debut album was being released. That's interesting because you're not even sure, I guess, technically if it works yet, although I'm sure they had an idea. They were like, yeah, this is good.
Yeah, he was just like, I mean, he really was like, can't put too many eggs in one basket. So he was really rocking both groups, like whichever one takes off, takes off. So I also wonder what Max
Imagine
was
a surprise
thinking.
when they all take off.
Yeah, right. That's the golden, or that was like the magical Christmas land, as we always call it, but it worked out for him. I wonder what Max was thinking, like, damn, didn't Lou just send me another group like a couple months ago?
Is this guy just loves boys.
Yeah.
He's just funneling boys through the Max Martin machine, see what happens.
Right. I mean, it worked out for Max for sure. Started putting him on the map.
Yeah, he got a few hits out of that for sure.
Yeah. So anyways, the Backstreet Boys self-titled debut album was released May 6th, 1996. And the album was released internationally at first and then reissued the following year in the US. And the album went triple platinum in Europe and has since gone 14 times platinum in the US. The album peaked at number 4 on the Billboard 200. And the album had quite a few singles. So let's dive in. The debut single was We've Got It Going On, which was recorded in Sweden with none other than Max. And we also did a whole episode on Max Martin, I forgot to mention. If you wanted to go back and listen to that, we mainly talk about all of Max Martin's number 1 hit singles. So Backstreet Boys and NSYNC both.
Which, as a quick sidebar, the only person that has more number 1s than Max is Paul McCartney.
Yep. But we fully believe here on the show that Max is going to overtake him for that title at some point. And we're keeping tabs on it.
So. Yeah, for a lot of reasons. But one of the main reasons, I think, is that Max works with a bunch of different artists. So there's a much higher shot
Yeah,
and he's still
that makes
releasing
sense.
stuff. Like the most recent one was Ariana Grande in like 2023. Isn't that it? Something like that?
Yep.
Maybe even 2024.
Yeah, I think he might have one early 2024 this year. So he's
if he
still
just
doing
keeps
it.
up the pace, like he's a lot younger than Paul, so I think he's absolutely gonna pass. At least all signs are indicating that. At least.
Yeah. So as for the charts, the song peaked at number 69 on the Billboard 100. The second single from the album was "As Long as You Love Me," which landed just about every other, like it was on every chart other than the Billboard 100. The list of charts was so long, but no Billboard 100. And this is actually one of my personal favorites by the band. Maybe my favorite. It's hard, but that one's definitely up there for me. The third single,
As Long as You Love Me is?
Yep. I love As Long as You Love Me.
Just that little acoustic lick in the beginning. I like all that. And it brings me back to being a kid when we were like playing Pokemon all the time.
Right? Exactly.
Any of these songs.
So the third single from the album was Get Down, You're the One for Me, which also failed to chart in the US. Small disclaimer, their debuts seem to be pushed internationally way more than in America. Because obviously, since they were a year release apart from international and the US release. So it's kind of weird. You'll see a lot of international charting, a lot of international numbers from them in the beginning. And so the US charts don't exactly light up until their next album. But anyways, as for the fourth single, there are two. One was released for the international album and one for the American album. So it doesn't specify. And so the fourth single for the 96 release, which was the international, was Quit Playing Games with My Heart. And this was their biggest single, hitting number 2 on the Billboard 100. And then the other
That's
fourth
the one
single,
that really reminds me of being a kid.
right? Yeah, I know. That one's a big one. And then the other fourth single was I'll Never Break Your Heart, which peaked at 35 on the Billboard 100. And then the fifth and final single from the album was Anywhere for You, which failed to hit in the US charts, but mainly because that single was only released internationally and not in the US.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yep.
So, thanks for that rundown of Backstreet Boys' debut. We're going to talk about NSYNC's self-titled debut now, which was released on May 26th, 1997, but only in Germany. What is the game plan here?
Dude, I don't know.
I mean, it worked, I guess. What do I know? It would do well enough to catch the attention of RCA Records, which they would help release it internationally on March 24th, 1998, so nearly a year later. We assume it was only released in Germany because of the groundwork that the Backstreet Boys had already laid out. Germany was probably primed, ready for more boys.
Yep.
So the album would go diamond in the U.S. alone, over 15 million copies sold worldwide. It peaked at number 2 on the Billboard 200. Across all the different versions, the album had 8 singles. So let's dive in. Lead single was I Want You Back, which hit 13 on the Billboard 100. And that's your favorite, right?
Yep, that's my favorite.
I'm trying to think. I can't even remember how that one sounds. Why am I blanking on that one?
Dude, I think
I'll have to go back. The second single was Tearing Up My Heart. That, I think, was the first song on the album. That's the one that, like, no pun, like tears into the album. That landed at 59 on the charts. Single number 3 was Here We Go. That was not released as a single in the US, so it didn't chart on our Billboard 100. Fourth single put out was For the Girl Who Has Everything, which was also not released as a single in the US, so no charting there. And that's true for our 5th and 6th singles as well, which were Together Again and You Drive Me Crazy, doing the Prince thing with the U there.
Mm-hmm.
The 7th single will bring us back to the US, and that is God Must Have Spent a Little More Time on You.
What a mouthful.
Dude, you know what's funny is these boy band song titles love their parentheses.
Yeah,
I love them.
I make a mention of that when I was doing when I was laying out the notes. I was like, what is with the parentheses? I didn't really understand what they were for, and so I had to look it up, and it's just to remind people of the full hook of the chorus.
Yeah. So, you might wanted to name the song Quit Playing Games, but anyone that's looking for it is going to Google Quit Playing Games with My Heart. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And if you name it Quit Playing Games, you might get 40 other songs called Quit Playing Games. So, obviously Google wasn't a thing at this point, but you know what I'm saying. When you go to the library and look it up in the encyclopedia.
There you go. As everyone does.
So, yeah, God Must Have Spent a Little More Time on You is it's too long of a title. And this one was actually able to land on the Billboard 100 at number 29. And if you're keeping up with the numbers, that leaves one more. The 8th and final single was Thinking of You, another parenthesis, I Drive Myself Crazy. So Thinking of You, I Drive Myself Crazy, which landed at 67 on the charts. So I mean, that's a pretty damn successful first album right there.
That's what I was thinking. They had so many more singles too. 8 singles is crazy. Now, of course, those singles weren't all.
I think you're right, though. They're coming in working on the groundwork. Yeah, they're coming in working on what Backstreet's kind of already built a little bit. So I get that.
Yeah, and I think it lays out so that it was 4 U.S. singles, 4 international singles, I believe, is how it was kind of laid out. So that's another reason why it's like the 8. So you have 4 and 4. Yeah, they really took an interesting strategy when they were debuting NSYNC and Backstreet Boys. Like, I don't know if at the time just boy bands were bigger over there. Maybe they looked into the numbers of like Boys to Men and stuff, and maybe they had really good international numbers, and that's why they pushed it. But there's no real good explanation for why there was so much push in Germany and whatnot. But I mean, as we know now, it worked very, very well. So now,
yeah, I wonder. I don't think it's something that could probably be replicated. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
Like, I don't think you could just read this, grab the blueprint, and try it yourself. And I don't think it's going to work. You know what I mean?
Probably unique to the times, right?
Yeah, and the group and the genre and just everything lined up. You know?
Yeah, lightning in a bottle for sure. So back to the Backstreet Boys, who started working on their second album basically immediately after their first. And the second album was released on August 11th, 1997, and was called Backstreet's Back. And that album actually released a day before the reissue that we talked about that debuted in the US. And they actually share a couple songs. So when they released the debut, they just kind of mixed it with the Backstreet's Back album a little bit. So it's kind of very interesting for the timeline, very weird for sales and everything. It made it really confusing. But the album did go diamond just from international sales alone, so not including the US. So very impressive. It had 3 singles from it. The lead single was Everybody, parentheses, Backstreet's Back, which hit number 4 on the Billboard 100. And the second single was one we've already talked about, As Long As You Love Me. And finally, the third and final single from the album was All I Have to Give, which hit number 5 on the Billboard 100. So much better chart performance from the Backstreet's Back album.
All I Have to Give sounds really kind of Boys to Men-ish as well, I would say. It's that slow kind of R&B, you know, guy dancing shirtless with crazy abs, like that kind of song.
Yep, they have quite a few of those.
Yep. So they followed their second album with a U.S. tour in November of 97. It was discovered that Brian had a congenital hole in his heart that was dangerously large. So Brian actually delayed surgery due to touring obligations. He finally underwent surgery in May of 98. So that's 6 months after that. Yep. Because of the surgery, the Backstreet Boys had to pass on a special concert being aired on by Disney Channel. That opportunity we passed on to NSYNC, which really helped push their debut album sales and really helped them become a force that could compete with the Backstreet Boys. Yeah, and so Lou's just like, yeah, cool, so whatever. So take a day off. I don't care.
Yeah, remember they were talking about that in the documentary, and they were like, they were making a little noise. NSYNC was before this, but this concert really pushed them to be able to, you know, compete with Backstreet Boys. And they even say themselves, like, Backstreet Boys were so big, it was like we were never bigger, but we were basically on the same level as them after this, is how they were explaining it. And then also in 1998 is when Brian started the first lawsuit against Lou Pearlman and Transcontinental, claiming Pearlman wasn't being honest about the band's earnings. And the rest of the group would join the lawsuit the following year, and settlements would be made outside of court. I think the numbers laid out were like, I think the band had made like $10 million or something, or should have, and they had only, as the group, received about $300,000 out of that 10 million. Was, I think, the numbers.
That's wild.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think I think it was Chris Kirkpatrick. In the documentary, he was saying, you know, he got a check for like 10 grand, and he was like, oh, nice, more money than I've ever seen in my life. And he said, JC, he called him the smart one of the group, kind of looked over his shoulder and was like, didn't you make that at working at like Outback or like whatever, wherever he worked. And he was like, oh yeah, wait a second. You see it all at once. It's different than if you get it, over time, but it's like, it's the same thing. Like it's not, you're getting robbed, but anyway, back to NSYNC. While their debut album was blowing up, they actually released a Christmas album on November 10, 1998. I remember this Christmas album for sure. It was called Home for Christmas. It actually peaked at number 7 on the charts, achieving the rare feat of having 2 albums in the top 10 on the Billboard 100. And this album sold 2 million copies, and they also recorded a version of Trash in the Camp from the movie Tarzan with Phil Collins. I've always loved that version. It's really fun.
Oh, yeah, I'm a big fan of it, too.
Yeah, and the Tarzan soundtrack is one of the best Disney soundtracks. I think most people agree.
Oh, yeah.
Phil Collins also did Brother Bear, right? I think that was... Yeah, it's funny. You can tell when something works, you see him like plain as day try to replicate it, and it just never works as well.
Yeah,
even though the music was great on that as well, it's just like it didn't hit the same way for everyone,
Yeah, so like they had Phil Collins do Tarzan and then return for Brother Bear, which was good, but like you said, not as good. Same thing with Elton John did The Lion King, and then he did El Dorado, which not as successful as Lion King.
El Dorado was a movie we saw a ton.
Yep, I love the movie, but
Lin-Manuel Miranda did Moana. And then he did he do Encanto? He did another one, I think. And then Moana 2 is coming out soon. So that's interesting. We'll see how that works. He seems to have been one of the most successful, though, actually, out of all of them. So that's pretty interesting.
Yep. So NSYNC was slightly behind Backstreet Boys when it came to their legal battle with Lou. They entered their lawsuit in 1999 for all the same reasons as Backstreet Boys, as we laid out. And you said when they looked at their checks, like, something doesn't add up. And so NSYNC threatened to leave RCA and record their next album with Jive Records during the lawsuit. So Lou and RCA countersued for $150 million to prevent them from performing under the name NSYNC and going to Jive Records and to return the masters they'd recorded and everything. So I love that just getting somebody under a lawsuit prevents them from making music. That is so ridiculous. So that was literally the whole point, was like, well, if you're under lawsuit, you can't go record with the other group, so it's kind of interesting how that works. But just like the Backstreet Boys, a settlement would be reached outside of court, allowing NSYNC to actually continue making music under Jive Records. So at the end of it, they ended up leaving RCA and joining Jive.
Yeah. Yeah, that's insane. And while the Backstreet Boys were in their lawsuit with Lou, they actually started recording songs for their third album, Millennium, which would be released on May 18th, 1999. And finally, an album that would be released in the U.S. and internationally on the same day. So the album achieved the number 1 spot on the Billboard 200 and sold 24 million copies worldwide. The lead single from the album was I Want It That Way, which hit number 1 in more than 25 countries, including our own American Billboard 100. The second single release was Larger Than Life. I remember that one being one of my favorites as a kid, which hit 25 on the Billboard 100. Was that your favorite overall, that song, Larger Than Life?
Definitely my favorite on the album. I don't know if it might have been my favorite overall.
That's definitely up there for me. Yeah, for sure. Because if you go back and listen to it, it's basically just a rock song.
Right?
It's kind of cool. The third single released was Show Me the Meaning of Being Lonely. Again, too long of a song. Surprised there's no parenthetical there. Which hit number 6 on the Billboard 100. And the fourth and final single from the album was The One, which hit number 30 on the charts. They followed the album with their Into the Millennium tour, which ran from June 1999 to March 2000. I saw that tour. I asked my mom when we were watching the documentary. I texted her, and she replied, I saw NSYNC and Backstreet Boys. One of them I saw in Greenville, and one of them I saw in Charlotte. I don't remember which was which. So now for a fun fact about... well, unless you're Britney Spears, it's not so fun.
Yeah.
But on Britney Spears' debut album, Baby One More Time, there were 3 Backstreet Boys hidden tracks to help promote Millennium. And this was actually done against Britney's wishes.
Dude, how much does that suck as an artist?
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah. So
yeah, just like, hey, you're doing what we say. It's like, well, wait a minute, I'm the artist. Well, and then again, I understand it a little more in the past, although I don't agree with it. Like in the past, like they made you. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like you, without them, you don't exist. So like I get them having a little more power. These days, it's like, yo, I'm the artist. What are you doing? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, it's been a complete, flop or swap. And also, I had no idea about the hidden tracks. I'd be curious to like that original CD, going and listening.
I didn't know that either.
Yep, there they are.
Yeah.
So now we can't.
That's crazy.
Now we can't leave all the fun to the Backstreet Boys. So let's talk about NSYNC's follow-up album, No Strings Attached, which was released March 21st, 2000, and the album debuted at the #1 spot on the Billboard 200, and it sold 2.4 million copies in the first week, which was a record that would be held until 15 years later when Adele broke it with her third album, 25. So overall, the album sold over 15 million copies worldwide, and it had 4 singles, the first being Bye Bye Bye, which hit #4 on the Billboard 100. Crazy that one didn't hit #1. The second single was It's Gonna Be Me, and I really wanted to type M-A-Y instead of M-E because of how Justin pronounces it. It's gonna be May.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this is the album that I had, and I remember.
Yeah,
very well.
The so much nostalgia with the album artwork for me because of owning it and literally playing that CD so many times that I remember like the case breaking and everything, and I just kept it going. Yep. So this is with all of them. They're like on a stage and they're being puppeteered, basically. For anybody wondering. So this was the song that actually hit #1 on the Billboard 100. Was It's Gonna Be Me. So that is the one that actually hit #1. And then the third single, I'll Never Stop, actually didn't chart at all. And the fourth and final single was This I Promise You, which hit #5 on the charts. And the No Strings Attached tour only ran from May 2000 to December 2000.
That's not very long. So the year 2000, the turn of the millennium, that was the peak for both bands. So it's the year of the boy bands. But, neither band was going to slow down the album production. The Backstreet Boys hit the studio towards the end of their Millennium Tour, put together their fourth album, Black and Blue, which was released on November 21st, 2000. The album entered the Billboard 200 at #1. However, the album sold, not however. The album sold over 8 million copies worldwide. That's pretty damn good. And most of those sales came from the U.S. The first single was Shape of My Heart. That was the last one. Yeah. When Shape of My Heart came out, I remember being like, okay, I think we're kind of nearing the end of this phase here. Mm-hmm. And that peaked at #9 on the Billboard 100. The second single from the album was The Call. I remember that song really well, which hit 52 on the charts. Here's a fun fact. The bass sound from the song was actually the sound of Howie farting in the booth while they were recording. Everybody thought it was hilarious, and Max Martin decided to take the sound and modify it into his famous dun 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 sound. So that's great. I didn't know that actually. And that's on The Call.
Yep.
Nice. I need to go back and listen to that.
Yeah.
Third single was More Than That, which hit #27 on the Billboard 100. Fourth and final single from the album was It's True, which did not chart, but was on that For the Fans album that I brought up during part 1. That's, I don't know. You can't find it anymore. It's barely listed on Wikipedia.
Right.
Can't find a track list or anything. I don't know. Yeah, I had both of them. There were 2 of them, I think. And they're long gone. The group followed the album with their Black and Blue tour, which went from January 01 to November of 01. And during this tour, AJ checked himself into rehab after an intervention from Kevin. That's a famous story from their documentary. Worth a watch. So AJ was dealing with alcoholism, depression, drug addiction, etc. All the tour stuff. So also during this tour, this is pretty crazy. The band played a sold-out show in Boston on September 10th, 2001. Right. Yeah, we're going to bring it up again.
Yeah.
Brian's wife was supposed to catch a flight back to L.A. with one of the set carpenters for the tour. She decided to cancel the flight, stay with Brian a little longer. That flight ended up being the plane that was hijacked and crashed into the North Tower. And the set carpenter was headed home for the birth of his second child. His name was Daniel Lee, and Brian gave a brief speech at their next show, followed by a moment of silence. So he actually boarded the flight and ended up dying?
Yep, and she decided not to board it last second, and that was the plane that crashed.
That's wild. There's a whole lot of stories like that around, that event.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a whole rabbit hole of people that, like, for some reason didn't get on the plane that day, and, like, and that kind of stuff happens. That's got to be so surreal. And you probably think about it every day of your life going forward.
Every day you're like, dude, that could have been me. Like, I got to cherish this moment right here because that could have been me. Especially because there were two of them. One went on, one didn't.
Right?
If, like, you both didn't go, you probably, I mean, I'm still, you'd think about it, but you probably it wouldn't impact you as much as if, like, hey, this guy's gone now. Like, that I was right there with him, Like,
yeah.
That's crazy.
So the Backstreet Boys had their first compilation album release in October of 2001, and it actually entered the charts at number 5 and sold over 6 million copies worldwide. Following all this, the band took a hiatus because Nick was pursuing his solo career, and the Backstreet Boys actually filed a lawsuit against Zomba Music Group, which is a parent company of Jive, because they claimed that the label promoted Nick's solo album at the expense of the Backstreet Boys. And so they wouldn't go back to the studio until 2004, but that album wouldn't even be released until 2005. But before we get that far ahead, let's jump back to NSYNC.
Let's do it. NSYNC co-headlined Super Bowl, 35, I think, with Aerosmith.
Nailed it.
Did I get that number right? Nice.
Yep.
I think I remember this one. The show was titled The Kings of Rock and Pop. We might have discussed this in our Super Bowl episode as well, way back. Let's see, I could tell you what number that is real quick. That would have been episode number 8. And we're on episode 35 today, so how about that? They also performed at the 2002 Winter Olympics the following year. But before we jump to 2002, they actually released their third album on July 24th, 2001. The third and final album from NSYNC was called Celebrity. I remember getting this one very clearly. The album debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200, and this album went 5 times platinum. The album came with 3 singles. The first was Pop, which Dirty Pop comes from that song. That hit number 19 on the Billboard 100. The second single was Gone. The song was originally written by Justin and Wade Robeson for Michael Jackson. Michael passed on the song, so Justin brought the song to NSYNC. Michael ended up coming back and saying he wanted to do the song as a duet with Justin, but the song had already been released under NSYNC. Interesting.
Right?
That's a wild story there. No, wait. No. Hold on.
I'll do it. Oh, we're already done. Sorry. Too late.
Yeah,
sorry, Michael.
Sorry, Michael Jackson. Yeah. It's the first time he's ever been told no. That song ended up hitting number 11 on the Billboard 100. The third and final single from the album was Girlfriend. Remember that one too, which hit number 5 on the charts. So NSYNC followed the album with their Pop Odyssey tour, which ran from May 2001 to September 2001. Following the tour, the group went on hiatus at the request of Justin, who wanted to record a solo album. And they all had intentions of getting back together, but the success of Justified, which was his first album, just snowballed into the group never recording any music together ever again. So that's pretty sad. They would make occasional appearances at different award shows and whatnot, but they would not record any music until they recorded a song for the Trolls Band Together soundtrack. That just came out like last year, right?
Yep, that's the first time they've hit the studio as a group since then.
That's cool. So the group's been working on new music together recently and got revamped by the song Bye 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 being a major song on the new Deadpool and Wolverine movie, which I have not seen yet, but I want to.
I've seen like the first 30 minutes from somebody who was playing like a ripped version, and I was like, nah, I'm just going to hold off and see it like in a proper setting. And
yeah, you just want to go see it for real.
It bothers me so much, though, when you go to Apple Music and look up their album and the song Bye 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 in parentheses says from Deadpool and Wolverine. No, it's not from that. It was a big song on its own way back. Like, that's so crazy that they added that.
Unless it was like a different version or something, they added something to it. Or
it's not, like though. That. It's the original from the album. I think they just did it to help re-push it, like as a
because they know everybody's going to be searching Deadpool Wolverine.
Yeah, because it does. The song does play like a role in the movie. So
interesting.
But anyways, we'll get back to the Backstreet Boys, who continue to make music on and off. And like I said a little ways back, they put together their 5th album, Never Gone, which was released on June 14th, 2005. The album took a different direction, moving away from teen pop and more into pop rock, I guess you could call it. The album debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200 and sold just over 3 million copies. The lead single was Incomplete, which peaked at 13 on the Billboard 100. And when I was going through the discography, I assumed I wouldn't know any songs after Black and Blue, but I actually remember this song. which shocked me. I was like,
yeah, Incomplete was big. I remember that one.
Yeah, I was like, oh wait, I've heard this. I remember it. But because I was just like you said with Black and Blue, where you heard the songs, you were like, this is probably, they're probably on the downside of the, the peak. And so I was like, I probably won't know anything after this. But so this kind of shocked me. So
well, I am surprised to hear the number 3 on the Billboard and the 3 million copies. And then Incomplete number 13. But I definitely remember Incomplete coming out. But see, at that point, me and you, I'm sure, and everyone else our age was on to the next thing. Like we're kids. We go through phases.
Linkin Park by then, I feel like.
Yeah, that probably would have been about right.
I was like, does that line up with the timeline? I feel like it does.
Or like Lil Jon and like Snoop Dogg and stuff,
Yeah, all that, the early 2000s pop. So anyways, the second single release was Just Want You to Know, which hit number 70 on the charts. And the third single was Crawling Back to You, which failed to hit the Billboard 100. And the fourth and final single was I Still, which also didn't see the Billboard 100. And then the Never Gone tour ran from July 2005 and ended in February 2006.
There you go. On June 23rd, 2006, some sad news. Kevin announced that he would be leaving the Backstreet Boys to pursue other interests. It's worth noting, I think, Kevin was quite a bit older than the rest of them. Mm-hmm. He was the oldest, and I guess he wasn't quite a bit older than all of them, but he was quite a bit older than the youngest one, which was Nick. I think there was what was the spread? Was it like 12 years or 11 years or something? I think when Nick joined, he was 11, and I think Kevin was already in his 20s.
I think it's around that. I think it's like a 9-year difference. Sounds about right.
So that's and when you're that age, like 9 years, if you're 50 to 59, that's not a big difference. If you're 11 to 20, that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
That's two totally different people. So anyway, Kevin announced he would be leaving the Backstreet Boys to pursue other interests. So the departure was amicable between Kevin and the band. The group was suggested to change their name to Backstreet after Kevin left, but the group decided against it. Interesting. I think that probably, I don't know if that would have been the right move, but I like Backstreet. Dropping the boys kind of makes sense when you're men. Mm-hmm. The Backstreet Men.
Backstreet Men.
They also turned down a reality show that would have had them find a fifth member. Oh, I would have watched that for sure.
Right.
There was actually interest from Lance Bass and Joey Fatone joining the group. That would have been awesome too.
Right.
But it's cool. It's cool. They just kind of, saved him a seat basically.
Yeah. So following Kevin's departure, the Backstreet Boys actually hit the studio to record their 6th studio album. And that was called Unbreakable, which was released on October 30th, 2007. And the album debuted at number 7 on the Billboard 200. And it would only sell about 500,000 copies worldwide. And the album came with 2 singles. The first was Inconsolable, which hit number 86 on the Billboard 100. And the second single was Helpless When She Smiles, which failed to see the charts. And they did go on an international tour to help promote the album, and it ran from February 2008 to November 2008.
And then the group went right back into the studio, put together their 7th album entitled This Is Us, which was released on October 6th, 2009. The album debuted at number 9 on the Billboard 200. That's really surprising to me. But there's not much to talk about with sales on this one. So this album also had 2 singles. The first was Straight Through My Heart, which hit the Bubbling Under at 6. Does that mean it's 106?
106.
Or 206?
Yep. 106.
Got it. The second single was Bigger, which failed to chart. And they embarked on a long tour that ran from October 2009 to March 2011. They're like, shit, dude, we got to pay for this album.
I know, right? They just got to go and play all their hits.
Sell some shirts.
Yeah. Pretty spot on, actually. So in May of 2011, the group announced that they had left Jive Records, and that same month they went on tour with New Kids on the Block as NKOTBSB, which is just the letters of both groups combined. And that tour went until June 2012. And in April of 2012, Kevin actually announced that he had rejoined the group permanently. And the group stayed together in a house all together to start working on their next album. And this is the album that would be associated with the documentary. And during this time, they actually celebrated their 20th anniversary that year and received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and declaring April 22nd as Backstreet Boys Day in Hollywood.
Nice. What are we doing for Backstreet Boys Day next year?
I don't know. We can go dance in public wearing all white.
That sounds really good. So that album, In a World Like This, is what it was called. Was released on July 30th, 2013. It entered the Billboard 200 at number 5 and has since sold about 800,000 copies. Nice. Moving on the way back up. We haven't mentioned it up to this point, but almost all the Backstreet Boys albums do really well in Japan. That tracks.
Yep.
But then again, boy bands are still kind of a big thing in Korea, Japan, things like that. K-pop, all that stuff.
Yep.
Anyways, the album had 2 singles. The first was In a World Like This, which did not hit the Billboard 100, but did make a ton of other charts. The other single was Show 'Em What You're Made Of, which also didn't chart. I only know that song from the documentary, and I actually really do like that song from what I've heard. Like, there's a lot of good stuff on this album.
Yeah.
And it just kind of gets lost a little bit, I think, with... Backstreet Boys coming out in 2013. Like, what are you going to do? Like, it's not going to be the same.
Yep. So,
and that doesn't mean it's good or bad.
Yeah, I was shocked at the 800,000 copies because this is still kind of, 2013 is really like around that time where like album sales are going away. Streaming is becoming a thing. People downloading music.
Spotify's become a thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Apple Music came out in 2014. I remember that because I was one of the, as soon as they announced it, I was like pre-subscribed to it. So
yeah.
I remember as soon as that came out, and that was 2014, 2015.
So later in 2013, the band actually made a cameo in the movie This Is the End. And it's at the very end when everybody gets to heaven and the Backstreet Boys lead the crowd in performing and dancing to the song Everybody, Backstreet's Back. And that actually won them an award for the best musical moment at the 2014 MTV MTV Movie Awards, not the Music Awards. And the documentary movie titled Backstreet Boys, Show 'Em What You're Made Of also was released January 30th of 2015, a little bit later. I forgot to mention the title of it earlier, and that was the other documentary we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Yep. So it came out a little bit
I
after
love that
the album.
scene, and This Is the End.
Dude, it's so good. Yeah.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. All the actors and everybody are like doing the dance and stuff, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I remember liking that. Like you see Seth Rogen like learned the dance. You're like, nice.
Right.
So here's a fun little fact. In August of 2015, Nick, AJ, and Howie filmed a movie that Nick had written called Dead 7. The film is about a group of gunslingers in a zombie apocalypse. The movie premiered on April 1st, 2016. The theme song for the movie was called In the End, and it featured Nick, AJ, Howie, Joey Fatone, Chris Kirkpatrick, Jeff Timmons from 98 Degrees, and Eric Michael Estrada from O-Town. Wow. That is a fun fact. I didn't know that at all.
Yeah, I went and listened to the song. It's pretty good, actually. But
how's the movie?
I have not watched the movie. It debuted on the Sci-Fi Channel, so
can't be good.
Yeah, I was like, it came out on the Sci-Fi Channel, so the Sci-Fi Channel doesn't always have the best stuff outside of like Star Wars and Star Trek.
But
yeah, we can't knock it until we watch it. But since we haven't heard of it,
all signs point to bad.
Yeah, it's like, since we haven't heard of it until now, probably not great.
Let's just call it what it is.
So in the fall of 2015, the band had also announced that they were working on a 9th studio album. And this time they would be working with producer Jacob Kasher, who worked with Maroon 5 and Britney Spears. And the band was hoping that the album would be done by 2016 for the Backstreet Boys cruise. Spoiler alert, wouldn't drop till 2019. But before that, the band actually released a song with Florida Georgia Line called Go, Your Mama and Me, which was the first time the Backstreet Boys had been on the Billboard 100 since 2007. I think it was like, it charted like 80 something. So nothing like crazy, but at least, hitting the top 100. And after this, the Backstreet Boys earned themselves a residency in Las Vegas. And that residency would be named Backstreet Boys Larger Than Life. And it was an 80 shows that went from March 1st, 2017 to April 27th, 2019.
The residency, that's the dream.
The residency, yeah.
That's the dream. So let's talk about the 9th album. DNA was released January 23rd, 2019. The album reached the number 1 position on the Billboard 200. So no sales to talk about because it's a modern day album. It's more streaming instead of buying albums, stuff like that. But this album did have 3 singles. The first was Don't Go Breaking My Heart, and no, it's not a cover of what you think it is. Yeah. The song peaked at number 63 on the Billboard 100. The next single was Chances, which was only able to hit the bubbling under Billboard at 7. The final single was No Place, which failed to chart entirely. Overall,
I really
you really enjoyed this album, right?
I did. It's good.
I don't know that I know this one as well.
Dude, you got to go listen to it. It's good. Yeah, it's like a it's like a good evolution. It really sounds like modern pop, but it's still like the Backstreet Boys. And like I remember listening to, I put it on like gonna have to grind my way through this one. And the first song I was like, okay, all right, this is pretty good. Second song I was like, okay, all right, this is not bad at all. And
it came to play.
Yeah, and actually my wife went to see the tour for it, the DNA World Tour, and she said it was actually one of her favorite concerts of all time. Was a huge fan.
Did she say why?
She said just like the mixture of like, she said it was a perfect mixture of playing the new songs and then like their classics, but the new songs are really good. So like the whole thing was great. And then like just the dancing, and there's a lot of nostalgia with, you know, their concerts. Even if you go see them now, they're going to play all the hits. It's going to be great. You're going to dance along, you know? So.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. So after the second leg of their tour got delayed due to COVID, it's crazy that the Backstreet Boys are existing in COVID times. Right. The band started working on a Christmas album in March of 21. They originally planned to return to Las Vegas and do a 2-month residency for the album, but due to COVID, the band failed to meet the deadline and had to push everything to late 2022. So Backstreet Boys' A Very Backstreet Christmas was released October 14th, 2022, and that debuted at number 17 on the Billboard 200. The 3 singles from the album were It's Christmas Time Again, Last Christmas, and Christmas in New York. So after this, the band finally resumed their DNA World Tour in April of 2022. The tour finished up in May of 23. That brings us up to today.
Real quick, I want to mention, did you know that there's a Billboard Christmas chart just for Christmas songs?
No.
Yeah. They hit number 1 on that chart, but I was like, I didn't even know there was a Billboard Christmas like chart. Does that only come around for a couple months a year? I'd have to do research on that chart, but that shocked me. I was like, wow, there's even a chart just for Christmas songs. Nuts.
Yeah, that's nuts. I've never heard of that.
Probably a little too much.
So that brings us to our rating portion of the podcast. So again, we rate on a scale of 5. Yeah. And we break it down into 6 categories, each 1 out of 5, and then we average at the end. So those categories are creativity, evolution, replayability, cultural impact, emotional connection, nostalgia factor, and then we get our total. I just realized we're going to have to do 2 of these.
I was just about to ask, are we going to combine Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, or are we going to hit them individually?
No, because well, I mean, NSYNC was so short-lived. So all right, let's start with NSYNC. Let's start with
NSYNC. Well, they're not going to get
creativity.
They're not going to get much on creativity since they were a copy carbon print of Backstreet Boys. Maybe a 1 or a 2. I'm gonna give them a 2. Yeah. Probably a 2 on there.
Evolution. They didn't exist
long enough
to really evolve, and I also think they didn't really evolve. So I think here's another 2, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I'm with you. We're gonna 2 out of 5 on the evolution.
This replayability is gonna be
after listening
between a 3 and a 4.
Yeah, after listening to the music again and going back, of course, there's some nostalgia there. I'm at a 3 on the replayability.
I'll match you there. Cultural impact. This is interesting. I think they did impact the culture. It's been a while, but also, you know, those bye memes go around to this day. So
yeah, I'm gonna give them maybe a.
Yeah, I was thinking of 4 as well. I think we're the same so far. Nice. Emotional connection. I'll put this at a 4 as well. And nostalgia factor is going to be a clean 5 out of 5 for me. For actually probably both of these groups. So I'm going to go down and go ahead and do that for Backstreet Boys as well.
Right. Yep. I'm gonna be a 3 out of 5 for emotional connection, and then I'm at a 5 for nostalgia. And I'll be a 5 out of 5 for Backstreet Boys as well. Just because these are like some of my earliest CDs that I ever owned as a kid. Like, just such fond memories of my really old gray CD player that I can see perfectly in my head and playing.
I think I can too. I think I remember that.
I had like a CD player it was like a CD player on the front and a cassette player on the top. And I had like the Disney song cassettes on the top. And then I had the CDs out in the front. And I just remember playing the life out of No Strings Attached and Millennium. And I think I also had Backstreet's Back.
Dude.
Yeah, dude. annihilated those CDs listening to them.
So your total for NSYNC ended up being a 3.2.
Nice.
Mine ended up being a 3.3.
They're 0.1 better to you.
Yeah. All right, that brings us to Backstreet. Let's hit them with that creativity. What you got?
So they're actually going to go. I'm going to give them a point higher than NSYNC, a 3 out of 5, because they have.
I don't know. I'm going to give them even higher than that.
You're gonna go. I was thinking about a 4, but
that sound is their sound. Like that boy band sound. Like when Max Martin and them got together, they created a whole genre that everyone copied and followed.
I guess that makes sense.
I mean, boy bands existed before them, but you don't listen to Boyz II Men and hear the same thing you hear when you listen to Backstreet Boys. Like that's a different thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I'm giving them a 4 there. I'm going to give them a 4 for Evolution as well. I mean, they're still going today, and every album's got something different, you know?
Yeah, I'm doing a 4.
Damn, that replayability might be a 4 as well.
Dude, I'm thinking so as well, man. I definitely like Backstreet Boys more than NSYNC, personally. As far as like, especially
I think,
with
they have more to offer, I think.
That's true. More songs, more albums.
I think that cultural impact's got to be a 4 again. I struggle to give them a perfect 5 out of this, but I mean, if you watch the videos of the impact they had on the culture at the time, they were the biggest thing in the world. There was nothing bigger.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, people were climbing their tour bus. They couldn't even get out of places. Like, so I'm going to give them a 4 there. Emotional connection. I mean, you know, I don't know that I emotionally connect any stronger than I do with NSYNC, so I'm going to match that at maybe a 4 again, I guess. So I'm 4s across the board, except for a 5 in nostalgia factor. That's hilarious. This might be one of my highest rated ones.
Right. So I'm gonna do, just to recap, I'm 3 out of 5 for creativity, 4 out of 5 for the evolution, 4 out of 5 for replayability, 4 out of 5 for cultural impact. I'm a 3 out of 5 for the emotional connection, and a 5 out of 5 for the nostalgia.
That puts you at a solid 3.8. And I'm at a 4.2, actually.
Nice. I think that is one of your highest ratings.
That's hilarious.
That's so good.
Well, I mean, as a 7-year-old kid, I was sitting there choreographing my own dances to them. So this was my original favorite band ever. So I guess that tracks.
Yeah. So man, pretty high ratings though from both. You know,
nice.
Which is crazy.
Hilarious. Anyone listening to this can be like, dude, what?
I know, right? You wouldn't think it because we listen to a lot of, well, I mean, you play
everything. That's the whole point.
We do listen to everything, but you play country. We have a lot of classic rock roots, obviously. And so it's kind of funny to see these boy bands do so well, but they hold such a special place in our hearts. So,
and I would argue probably most other people our age.
Yeah, it probably bigger because of the age that we associate with them so heavily. But I mean, good music is good music. So
cool. You want to bring us on home?
Yep. So that's going to wrap us up today. But before we hop out of here, don't forget, like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Otherwise, you can give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to us. You know, we'd appreciate anything, any kind of ratings or reviews. You know, just let us know what you're thinking. We're also on socials, Instagram and TikTok. And then we also have a Patreon, $5 a month, and that'll give you access to the Discord, as well as a shout out on our episodes and the ability to vote on future topics. So today has been
Sounds killer.
Backstreet Boys and NSYNC. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, man. We'll see you guys next week.